How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Corpse Party Blood Drive. When last left off, we completed Chapter 0. So let's start Chapter 01. Returning. A day had passed since the events of the Shimorenjaku's South Apartments. This was to be a significant turning point for me, and Mochida might have been a part of it from the start. Except that fate seemed to have other plans for him.
先生、俺、今日は大事な用があって。
ダメ。サトシ君、昨日の唾液の小テスト、ちょっと残念な点数だったでしょ?
Like an owner training a puppy, Kuon gave him a strong glare and held up her index finger in reprimand.
今から1時間、私の授業に集中しなさい。そうしたら、次の小テストも解けるようになるから。
I don't understand why she wants his dick so badly.
先生って英語科でしょ? 唾液なんて専門外じゃ。
一生懸命教えるからできるよ。
She seemed a little taken aback by that remark, puffing up her cheeks like a chipmunk in protest. Who cares? Get on with it!
いや、先生、クオン先生って、ユイ先生そっくりだな。ごめんなさい。
Looking both bemused and guilty, Mochida tried to get up and leave his seat in one swift motion, but he was quickly and easily caught, lifted up, and forcefully set back down.
ダメ。
I mean, they have 3D models. Why can't they show this instead of like being descriptive in the text? Like in Corpse Party 2 that I played last. Miss Kuon was smiling. She was actually enjoying this.
なんだこの先生。
Kind of hate why how it has become visual novelly. It started like in Blood Book of Shadows. It kind of goes back to how the old game were, but it's still like a lot of text. Miss Kuon was only the slightest bit taller than Mochida. This made her taller than the average, but her arms were small and frail. There seemed to be no way she could possibly have lifted someone of his build. Satoshi seems not a tall person either. This whole situation was rather bewildering for him, and he made no attempt to hide his confusion.
さあ、始めるよ。
はい。
He had no other option. Apparently, he was going to be studying algebra for the next hour, come hell or high water. Meanwhile, at a local cafe near the school, Kishinuma and I were sitting down to speak with Aiko Niwa for the informant who led my friends to me the previous night.
大丈夫？お腹でも痛いの？
I responded with a dismissive gesture, while continuing to rub my abdomen with my other hand. Ever since the previous night, I'd had this constant, unbearable urge to pee.
なんだろう。
What the hell is wrong with me?
昨日怖い思いして過呼吸が続いたから、体がおかしいのかな。
I mean, you're not... I mean, there should be available toilets in this restaurant, right? Or cafe.
ずっと膀胱が膨らんでる気がする。
Bitch! Go to the bathroom! Toilet! Restroom! Whatever.
話そうかしら。
Now, where shall we begin? The restroom, maybe? Aiko tilted her head and stared at me, looking me up and down, seemingly judging my every mannerism, my every movement, and being like, how you do? It was making me feel really self-conscious. I covered my abdomen with both hands, and as if guarding it from her gaze.
昨日はありがとうございました。いいえ、大したことはしていないわ。如月学園って案外広いのね。岸沼くんたちを探すのに少し手間取ってしまったわ。
Oh, Kishinuma is there? How about fucking showing him in the game? Like, because they're doing this dumbass, this stupid visual style, and it's not showing the 3D models that they have. I forgot that Kishinuma was there. Kishinuma and I stared at one another, still unaware how to feel about this strange new addition to our entourage.
あゆみちゃん、岸沼くん。あなたたちって天神小学校の生還者よね。
Nani? Again, they're not showing Kishinuma. Why? Oh, he's not important. We pledged never to discuss Heavenly Host with anyone else, which we'd always assume would be an easy promise to keep. But now, casually and out of the blue, here we are.
なんであんた
Yoshiki.
あなたたち死後の世界に接してきたでしょう。通常人間には身につかないオーラの色をしているわ。私には見えるの。
Both Kishinuma and I were speechless. I just sat there staring at my palm, subconsciously trying to see my aura. I guess Aiko was smiling at us triumphantly.
愛子さんは霊能関係の情報屋でナホさんのお友達なんですよね。
Could also be like animation's hard, that's why they're doing this.
ええ、ナホちゃんに天神小学校の情報を提供したのは私。
Still, having the 3D models just sit there almost statically is better than this. Like, they could have that. Like this, but with the 3D models in the background, instead of this. Like, we see it from top down, the cafe, them sitting in... The true source of the death and subsequent erasures that had turned our lives into a living nightmare was the Sachiko Ever After ritual posted on Naho's occult blog. I'd been a fan of Naho's for quite some time. Yeah, who cares?
ナホちゃんが響先生のために霊能探偵をやっていたことは知っているわよね。
はい。幸せの幸子さんの情報が掲載されてから失踪されたことも。
私はね、心霊スポットや霊能関係の情報を集めて、それを欲しがる人に有償で提供してきた。報酬はお金、もしくは私の興味をそそる霊具の類。相手によってふっかけ方も変えるけれど。まあ、ギブアンドテイクよね。向こうは情報が欲しい。私はお金と霊具が欲しい。
Physically, Aiko was a very attractive young lady, but personality-wise, the jury was still out. Her words were calculated and emotionless. Her true intentions are a mystery.
だから私は情報屋をやっているの。ナホちゃんもいいお客さんだったわ。あの子が最後に買ったのが天神小学校の情報。ナホちゃん、これで響先生の小説がなんとか賞を取れるってすごくはしゃいでた。ねえ、教えてくれる？あなたたちの閉じ込められたあの異空間にナホちゃんはいた？
ナホさんは響先生と一緒に亡くなっていました。
I looked down as I answered. Despite everything she'd done, the memory of Nao's passing was still painful for me. She'd become one of the heavenly host's lost soul and gone completely berserk. In the end, I was the one who finished her off.
そう、やっぱりね。
Aiko seems completely unaffected by this revelation. Her tone remained even, and her expression cold and distant. Honestly, I had had about enough of her by this point. She was so devoid of empathy, it was almost offensive. I was genuinely starting to get pissed off.
平気なんですか？
残念だと思うわ。でも予想はついていたから、わざわざ取り乱す必要もないでしょ。
Kishinuma continued to stare intently at Aiko with his own brand of cold, emotionless eyes. He was oddly quiet, though his anger was palpable. I clenched my fist.
じゃ、この子はおまじないを一緒に行ったと思うんだけど、あっちにはいたかしら。
Aiko showed us a photo of a girl named Sayako Ue. Ue.
いえ、会ってないからわかりません。
そう。
Aiko's expression was so unfaltering, you could carve it in stone. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to say something.
ナホさんのことお客さんだなんて、そんなの友達って言わないと思います。
My voice was breaking with rage. But even if that hadn't been the case, my face must have read like a book. This icy bitch may have had only one expression, but I'm sure it didn't.
あら、あなたは客って言葉に対して随分と偏見を持っているのね。取引を行う以上、私はそこに最大の誠意とクオリティを提供する。つまりそれがパートナーとしての信用で、フレンドシップにも負けないものだと思っているけれど。
そんなこと。
I had no idea what to say. It seemed like Aiko was used to this sort of thing. Her response felt carefully rehearsed, like a sales pitch. Finally, Kinishima broke his silence.
あんたよ。昨日篠崎を助けてくれたことは感謝する。けどよ。金やなんかの見返りのために、そんなろくでもない情報を拡散させるなんて、旗迷惑だと思わねえのか。
情報は情報よ。それ自体に罪はないわ。道具と同じ。それをどう使うかは使い手の問題でしょ。その気になれば、その辺にあるコップでも人は殺せてしまうのよ。
なもん、詭弁じゃねえかよ。
あなたもそう思う？あゆみちゃん。
愛子さん、ごめんなさい。私はあなたの考え方嫌いです。無責任だと思います。
Her expression remained calm and collected overall, but her eyes blinked several times in rapid succession. It was the first outward sign of emotion we'd seen from her.
やれやれ、ひどい嫌われようね。慣れてるけど悲しいわ。
Aiko quickly shrugged off her sudden outburst and was back to her usual icy self.
まあ、天神書は俺らがぶっ壊してきたからいいけどよ。
An awkward tension filled the room, or at least our table.
じゃ、本題に入りましょうか。私があなたたちに近づいた理由、伝えたいことについて。
Aiko produced a thick, hardbound file folder from the light blue bag she'd brought with her. She opened it to reveal several documents of questionable nature. Among them were what looked to be a family tree, as well as numerous pages featuring black magic symbology or images that looked like tree branches. Black
黒
magic.
魔術の文字対応表。篠崎家の家系図。
少しショッキングなことを伝えるわね。
Aiko was looking directly into my eyes now. Her gaze was fixed, intense, and unblinking.
さっき岸沼くんが言ったことだけれど、間違いよ。
あ？何がだよ。
天神小学校は壊れてなどいない。今もまだ存在し続けているのよ。
Oh no. Anyway.
これを見て。
Aiko placed a black and white photo on the table. It wasn't the clearest of pictures, but there was no doubt that the location it depicted was Heavily Host Elementary. In the picture, a small girl could be seen standing in one of those all too familiar hallways, holding a hatchet in her right hand.
天神小学校。
なんだよ、これ。
やっぱり。これは私が念写したものよ。
A
力が足り
thoughtograph?
なくて少し不鮮明ではあるけれど、今現在のあの空間、天神小学校の様子。
一体どういうことなんですか？
What is a thoughtograph? I can't even describe what was going through my head at the moment. I felt like I was about to burst. Aiko, however, remained calm as ever while recounting her story.
順を追って説明するわね。まず、昨日の例の赤い箱だけれど、開けると、このレ具が出てきたの。
The box had found a Makina's futon. Inside it were apparently two stones resembling Makatama, comma-shaped ceremonial objects from Japanese antiquity. Also included in the box were several more roughly hewn stone, as well as a lining along the edges consisting of crumpled pieces of thin white paper.
残念ながら箱の中でほとんど割れていたけれど、この一組は無事だったわ。
They looked almost as demented version of yin and yang symbols, puzzle pieces that were clearly built to be slotted together. Aiko now held one stone in each hand and was motioning them toward one another, as if to drive that point home.
霊具というのはね、簡単に言えば死者の思いが込められたもののことで、物に閉じ込められた霊、またはその生前の記憶が持つ者に永遠と泣き言を語りかけてくる愉快なものよ。私はこう見えて無類の霊具コレクターでもあるの。
Kishinuma and I briefly locked eyes again. We shared the same look of bewilderment. Aiko's personality was much more twisted than either of us had initially perceived it to be.
この子の意志を読もうとするとね、呪わしい声と一緒におさげの少女や廃校の風景が見えてきたのよ。で、気になったからこのカメラに。
At this, she produced an old instant camera and placed it on the table in front of us.
私の念を映してみたの。それがその写真。私がこの霊具を使ってその時の今現在を念写したものよ。過去や未来の時間を超えた念写は私にはできないから。
I examined the photograph in greater detail, and a chill ran down my spine. There was absolutely no denying what it depicted.
そんな
I was actually shaking.
篠崎幸子を失ったあの学校は私たちが逆打ちで脱出した際に崩壊したはず。
でも寸前のところでとどまったってところかしら。私に語りかけてくる声の主がまだいるのかもね。
Aiko motioned toward the photo in my hand.
例えば写真の女の子とか。誰かしらね、この子。
Gasp! The answer was beginning to dawn on me. A sudden cold sensation exploded through my body and I shuddered, as if I was trying to shake off the encroaching realization that my bladder is full and I'm peeing my panties.
くそ、あの地獄みたいな場所がまだ存在してるってのかよ。
Kishinuma leaned forward. The conversation was clearly beginning to engage him a lot more than it had been.
その天神小学校、いえ、学校の形をしたあの異空間だけれど、ナホちゃんに紹介した手前、私も気になって調べていたの。あの異空間の正体はね、涅槃という死後の世界に近い磁場なのよ。普通はこの世とは別の次元に存在するものなのだけれど。
涅槃？
ええ、篠崎義恵については知っているわよね。
はい。
篠崎の家、義恵の診療所に黒の本と呼ばれる魔導書、ブック・オブ・シャドウズがあったことも。
はい。
Why? How could she know about that? A million thoughts, a million questions were running through my head. I was speechless. All I could do was sit there and hear her out. It was like a muffled scream or a moan of agony. The sound you make when you want to make a sound, but are hardly able to. We just heard it! Why do you need to describe it again? The one was a little more forceful, accompanied by trashing. It caused the nearby table light to fall over and roll along the ground.
あなた、落ち着いて、お願い。
This was Yoshie Shinosaki's clinic, and Yoshi herself was on top of her husband, holding him down with both her hands. She continued her Shinto purification chant. To prevent Seiji from biting off his own tongue, he had been gagged with a towel. Needless to say, he wasn't looking particularly well. Not far from where this was occurring, Sachiko stood against trembling as she watched the proceedings with hesitant sidelong glances. Oh yes, that was really fast. Seiji still collapsed on the floor, was clearly suffering. His body was bent into the most unnatural shape, and he was fervently clawing at his neck.
かしこみかしこみもんま押す。
Sachiko's father screamed through his gag, foam beginning to froth out of his from the edges. He was going into cyanosis. Ghostly images of Shinosaki women from ages past smiled down upon the event from the ceiling, laughing and mocking his suffering. Worse still, some of the women had traditionally blackened teeth, giving their smiles an unintentionally sinister edge. The atmosphere within the room was heavy, as if spirit occupied every empty corner, dancing and flitting about freely and joyously. Seiji's body sharply bent and began convulsing.
ありませる払い戸の狼たち。あなたしっかり三親の御霊様お願いです。連れて行かないでください。
Her great-grandmother, Sarah, the head of the Shinosaki family, was among the black-teethed women laughing joyously at Seiji's suffering. His voice began to weaken and his convulsions began to lose strength. Finally, the last spark of life has left his body. His eye rolled back into his head and all movement ceased. Sachiko looked up, eyes glazed over with tears. Yoshiki, too, was stricken with grief and despair.
霊能力者の血筋篠崎の者と結婚した夫は必ず早々の死を遂げる。呪われた家の運命に抗えなかった義恵は心ない者たちから守るよう篠崎の家に託されていた禁忌の本に手をつける。それが黒の本、ブック・オブ・シャドウズ。
Ah, yes, the visual novel. With the point and click system.
そのことを恐れるあまり黒魔術に頼ったの。まさに荒唐無稽でバカな話よね。義恵自身もすがれるものなら何でもいい程度にしか思っていなかったと思うわ。
Aiko stared deeply into my eyes, seemingly fishing for a reaction to her tale.
ところがまさか信じられないことが起こる。
I continued listening, unknowingly stroking the wound of my thigh, as unpleasant memories of my own foolish run-in with black magic resurfaced.
義恵の体に流れる篠崎の血筋、その強い霊力に想像もつかない何かが呼応してしまった。それは
Gasp! I instantly knew what she was going to say.
義恵の術で本の中から呼び覚まされた何か。それは涅槃。未来永劫、死者と共にいられる場所、死後の世界を切り取った空間がこの世に生まれてしまったの。義恵はもう半分正気を失っていたのね。一人娘の幸子を現世に残して、自分は夫の魂と共に生涯をそこで添い遂げようとした。ランド・オブ・コープス。ところが涅槃には意志があり、義恵の手でコントロールできるものではなかったの。
I knew that all too well. Just like Yoshie, I experienced my own tragic failure with black magic at the Shinosaki clinic.
黒魔術には障害反動がある。夫の魂はバラバラに飛散し、義恵の命も消えかけた。自分の愚かな行為を悔やみながら呼吸を止めようとしたその時、底なしに霊能力の強い一人娘幸子が涅槃を丸ごと体の中に飲み込んだの。幸子が
Oh, this is long. The poor girl collapsed on the floor, violently thrashing about as the weight of the entire dimension crushed her from the inside. This action had saved her mother's life, certainly, but death would have surely been preferable. Picking herself up, Yoshie rushed to her daughter's side in tears.
幸子、さっちゃん、あなた。お母さん死なないで、お母さん。
Both parent and child were bawling, pain mixing with relief, mixing with pain again. The little girl buried her face into Yoshi's bosom and just cried and cried. Yoshi grasped her tightly with both arms, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. By this point, Sachiko's body had begun producing a dark blue aura.
ごめんね、さっちゃん。ごめんね。お母さん間違ってた。お母さんにはあなたがいるわ。もうあなたを置いていこうだなんて思わないから。
あなたも知っての通り、幸子も篠崎家当主直系の血を引くサラブレッド。義恵を超えるほどの霊能力を持っていたのね。涅槃を丸ごと体内に封じ込めるなんてものすごいことよ。
Aiko took a big noisy sip from her coffee mug.
当時ほとんど最強の霊能者だったんじゃないかしら。まだほんの小さな子供だったけれど。でもその幸子が死んでしまって。そう、保健医義恵の転落事故と同時に幸子が行方不明になった50年前のあの事件。あれは校長による殺人事件でした。やはりそうなのね。校長が余計なことをしでかしたおかげで幸子の中に吸い込まれて封印されていた涅槃が復活し、あの異空間天神小学校が生まれてしまったのよ。
It's probably because the school was the site of Sachiko's violent demise that her nirvana took on its form.
ま、とはいえ復活した涅槃も資料として蘇った幸子の力で再び抑制されて、やっぱりその支配下に置かれていたようだけれど。幸子がいろんな力を使えたのもその涅槃の影響だったのかしら。
This was all starting to make a sick sort of sense. The pieces were falling into place and painting an absolutely awful picture. I shuddered to myself as I considered it.
現在はあなたたちが脱出の際に幸子を取り除いてしまったから、涅槃は再び暴走状態になっているのよ。なくなってしまえばよかったのに。あんな危険な場所。
This entire conversation was a roller coaster of emotions for me. At this point, I was just angry. Angry at everyone involved in this whole ordeal, and myself included.
さて、ここで少し突飛な話をするわよ。ついてきてね。はい。死んだ友達にまた会いたい？
That certainly got our attention. We both perked our heads up
涅
immediately.
槃で死んだ霊は成仏できずに囚われ続けるというわ。お友達の魂だってまだあそこにいるかもしれない。実はね、黒の本ブックオブシャドウズにはいろんな魔術が書かれているの。義恵の使った涅槃を生み出す術の他にも反言の術というものもある。
Nagashima and I knew about that one all too well. Well, they tried it.
命を無理やり戻すなんて敬虔な宗教家に言わせれば神のおぼし飯に背く背徳の行為だと言われそうだけれどね。
は？
Kishinuma seemed a bit more confused than he probably should have been, though I suspect the look on my face may have had something to do with it. I performed that spell, the very one Aiko was describing. It took hours, failed miserably, and killed my sister. All at once, the guilt returned. I lowered my head solemnly. Aiko grinned at me, and I had this sinking suspicion it was because she somehow knew that I was thinking. What I was thinking. Though I couldn't be sure, and I certainly didn't know how she would.
けれど そんなものはクソくらいよね。冒涜も破壊も何でも来いよ。死んだ友達を生き返らせたいんでしょ。だったらあの本を探し出し、天神小学校でもう一度あの術を行えば成功する可能性は飛躍的に上がるんじゃないかしら。
おいあんた、何無責任なこと言ってやがんだ。またヤバいことになったらどうすん。
I didn't exactly mean to interrupt Kishinuma, but quite honestly, I didn't even realize he was talking. I was too focused on what Aiko had just said.
あなたは知っているんですね。私と中島さんの吉江の家での失敗を。
Aiko tilted her head at me, the same wry smile creeping across her face. She'd gone from cold and emotionless to knowing and expressive in a mere instant.
あの時のことは夢幻だったと思っています。ありえないものを見て、ありえない体験をして、私はおかしくなっていたって。してはいけないこと、あんなこともう忘れたいの。でも現実だった。
Aiko pointed to the scar on my neck, then went one step further and lightly brushed it with her hand. I could feel that touch deep within my soul. I suddenly found myself swallowing my next breath, practically choking on thin air.
いい？人が本来触れることすらできない世の常識の裏側にあなたは手を突っ込んだのよ。今さら逃げられると思う？
I looked down again, trying my best to avoid Aiko's gaze.
私にそんなことが。
When had I started crying, I raised my head again, intent upon looking deep into Aiko's eyes as she answered my question. But she looked so blurry through my tears. I could tell, though, that she was smiling at me. It was the same expression her new standard.
そんなことって何？みんなを。うん何？あなたの口からちゃんと聞きたいな。どうしたいの？生き返らせ。よく言えました。
Aiko patted my head as one might a dog's after a successfully performed trick.
黒の本が生み出すのは魔女の英知が起こす奇跡よ。それは運命をもねじ曲げる力。たとえそれが確定した運命であろうともね。あなたは強力な霊能者の家系篠崎家の末裔。日野江さんがいない今、これはあなたにしかできないことかもしれない。
My confidence was being bolstered by the minute, though in retrospect that was likely Aiko's aim. Nonetheless, if there was still something I could do for my friends...
だけど肝心のブックオブシャドウズがどこに行ったのかもわからないし、それに幸子を失った天神賞には幸せの幸子さんのおまじないではもう行けない？そうだと思います。あの学校で菅野由紀ちゃんという女の子に聞きました。
Aiko once again placed a bluish-white Makatama stones from the box in either hand, this time fitting them together, though not quite the way they were supposed to interlock.
そこでこれよ。それはものすごい霊力を持ってる。
Whoops! I skipped. As one expected, given that they are spirits items from the Shinosaki line, the voice I heard told me about them. They're called Ever After Stones. Ever After Stones? I leaned forward despite myself. The name sent a shiver down my spine, but now that I'd heard it, I had to know more.
この石は2つで1つなの。これをパズルのようにくっつけて、涅槃よ、死人を迎えよと唱えれば、触れている者みんながいつでも天神小学校へ飛べるわ。
Oh, I can't even stop and save. Oh, this is so long. I have to stop here. We have to know more next time. Hope you guys enjoyed this visual novel so far. I'm looking forward to actual gameplay, so I'm gonna leave you guys with a high five.